Welcome, everyone. And so the day has come. I've been hinting about this for a few episodes now. And so we're going to try this out. It's a brand new segment here on Simply Trade. And trust us, I think you will really like this. So it's a little bit about our host here. She's really smart. She's insightful. She's sharp. And she's always on top of the trade news or information, anything that's going on in trade. Our producer, Mara, she started calling her the Taylor Swift of trade. Later, Anik, our other host for the weekly roundup, started posting and making that more on social media that this person is the Simply Trade, or not the Simply Trade, but the Taylor Swift of trade. So anyway, so we're going to start calling this segment Simply Trade Cindy's version. So let's go ahead and welcome her not only to her first show, but today happens to be her birthday. So let's go ahead and welcome her. This is now Cindy's version. Welcome, Cindy.
Great. Thanks to be here, Lalo. And anyone who knows me knows I love to talk. And secondly, I love to talk about trade. And I'll give everyone a little bit of a hint. When I've been on Simply Trade podcast before, Anik has always called me the Taylor Swift of trade. So that's where the Cindy's version came from, is Taylor's version. And I told Lalo I was going to pick a Taylor Swift song to be the theme of the podcast today. And today's is Blank Space. Go look up the song by Taylor Swift. Lots of people know this song, but I have a blank space, baby, and I'll write your name. Well, Trump has written the names today. We got the news yesterday that all of the reciprocal tariffs were announced with a 7-day implementation from yesterday. We saw 20 some countries that were set at 10 to 15%. Those countries that had already negotiated a trade deal that was incorporated into the percentages as best that we could tell when they were implemented or announced yesterday. So no huge surprises, I don't think, for anyone. And now we go about the very laborious task of trying to get our systems programs, try to contact all of the importers and exporters who are doing business in those from those countries and ensure that they are ready to pay these additional tariffs. In some cases, it's not more than what they're already paying, so there won't be a lot of change. But in some cases, it does go up 5 to up to 25% more. The big outlier is Canada. Canada got hit with 35% tariffs as of midnight this morning, so not a great surprise there. The reasoning seems a little dubious. It's that they did not stop the flow of fentanyl coming in, and they didn't take enough action in that regard. Although the statistics on the northern border don't really support that there's a lot of fentanyl coming in. As a matter of fact, as I've indicated before, CBP's own data indicates that the majority of the fentanyl comes in on the southern border, driven in a car owned by a U.S. person, driven by a U.S. person. So I'm not sure how these tariffs are really going to affect the fentanyl trade coming from the southern border or even from the northern border. Mexico got a reprieve of 90 days. They want to make a better deal than what they have. Same with China. It was announced that they're going to delay the agreement for another 90 days while they continue to talk. No hints really on how or where the percentages will land for either country right now. Those are being very close held by the administration. Brazil, also huge announcement yesterday, 40% additional tariffs, so it brings it up to 50%. This is really concerning. It's a Section 301 tariff with immediate result effectiveness, and this is really political in nature. It is to punish the so-called prosecution of the former president of Brazil and take some political actions against some of the court personnel there specifically. putting sanctions on them. This is really concerning. I think for those in business, mixing international trade and economics with a political means to be achieved, especially in another country, seems a little bit dubious. I am one to have a direct cause and effect. If you're trying to have protect an industry and you want high tariffs and you're trying to ensure that domestic industry remains viable and active, you put a high tariff on, the effect is that there's not going to be a lot of imports, or the imports that come in are going to be more expensive. I'm not sure what the cause and effect is going to be for tariffs in Brazil. Same thing for Canada and Mexico. I'm not sure that the cause and effect here is really linked. Also announced copper 232, 50% came out, but lots of carve-outs. We were all expecting this to be a very encompassing 232, especially based on some of the investigation language that we've seen. However, there were a lot of carve-outs. Not a lot of raw copper material is going to be covered. A lot of the derivatives and component products are going to be covered, but there seemed to be an understanding that the domestic industries need a free flow of copper, especially in its raw form, to support manufacturing here in the U.S. I think it's one of the first small positive steps we've seen in the analysis for any of these trade actions was an understanding, a more in-depth understanding of what these tariffs are really doing to domestic manufacturing. So I'd like to really touch quickly on how it is affecting domestic industries. I'm a huge news junkie, so I've been looking at different data analysis and different reports. And what I saw from Reuters especially is that they've been tracking the financial results for companies and those who are impacted by trade based on quarterly results that have been announced to date. And of 132 US-based companies to date, what we are seeing is that 70 of those companies have withdrawn or cut guidance, saying that they cannot give forward-looking guidance to investors on a company's annual revenue. That's unheard of. That's over half of those companies are saying it's so volatile in trade right now that we can't project what our company is going to look like in the next 6 to 12 months. Also, 22% of those indicated that they hiked the prices on consumer products, whether it's planned or already implemented. They are passing on the costs of the tariffs to the consumers. And I think that's very concerning when you're looking at how the economy is going to perform and in terms of inflation and the discretionary spending that Americans have, which make our market very desirable. This is why all of those companies want to do business in the United States. We have a lot of discretionary income traditionally, more than other countries. So the fact that they're hiking prices is concerning because that means less discretionary spending amount. Also, 25 of those 132 companies weren't warned that their profit margins are expected to decline or are under extreme pressure. So they, even though they couldn't give full guidance, they are saying, do expect that we're not going to be as profitable as what we once were. One stat that I thought was really interesting, 18% or 18 companies have made short-term changes in the production of their goods and services that do rely on certain raw materials or exploring cheaper alternative suppliers. But also, I think this does go back to the planning that a lot of large and medium-sized companies did. As a result of COVID, we saw the need to have duplicative supply chains so that any one company or any one manufacturing line wasn't dependent on a product that was only sourced one location. Because if that was hit by a natural disaster or a COVID-like limitation, then they couldn't produce their goods. So what a lot of companies have done is they've diversified their supply chain to make sure that they have duplicative supply chains. So some of that could be accounted for the fact that people are more readily flipping the switches from one location to another, depending on how big the tariffs are. So that's a huge change, I think. 18 companies in a short term. Also, 28 announced a financial hit, a direct financial hit due to the tariffs. And I think the most concerning one that I've seen to date is really that Ford announced an $800 million hit directly from tariffs. And it did affect their profit. They have experienced a first quarterly profit loss for the first time in several years, and they are linking it directly to the tariffs that are being implemented. So this is having a huge impact overall on the United States economy and on the health of companies that are based here. Similar information, EMEA, which doesn't include the UK, 24 cut guidance, 63% had price hikes. So that was really concerning. Only 22 in the US, but 63 of the EMEA-based companies. And it could be that, those companies that are based in EMEA, when they bring products into the United States, 100% of those products are going to be subject to tariffs now. And if you have a U.S.-based company that does have offsetting U.S. manufacturing, that's going to explain the difference. One interesting thing I saw in the data as well was that 26 EMEA companies have decided to make changes in investment in their or relocation. So are the tariffs working? This is a good indication that perhaps the tariffs are working, that they are moving more production to the United States. However, the data doesn't support that either. When you dig into it, they're relocating to other cheaper countries for production so that they can get a lower tariff rate. So really a mixed bag when it comes to understanding how the tariffs are impacting overall the economy. So what's next? What's coming? Well, I've been saying since the tariffs rolled out that really consumers are going to start hitting their pocketbook in late summer. And here we are, beginning of August. And I think that we are seeing, based on the data here that does outline, we are looking at an impact in pricing. And I think once the rest of these tariffs come into play, we're going to see even more price pressure on the economy and on consumer spending. So it'll be interesting to watch all of those indicators. On the CBP front, we haven't seen a lot of changes come into play yet with personnel. There were some small changes. We saw some people moving around once the commissioner was confirmed, Rodney Scott, but we haven't seen the large-scale changes that some of us anticipated once he came into play. We do know that there are some studies being done internally at CBP to rejoin the Office of Field Operations and the Office of Trade, which was split when DHS was actually formed. So we are looking and watching to see if there is forward movement on that. That is going to take an act of Congress because the Office of Trade is outlined in the TIFTIA. The Trade Facilitation Trade Enforcement Act. So we aren't quite sure how the administration is going to deal with that, the fact that it's in there. And then last but not least, de minimis. De minimis is going away August 29th. The one big beautiful bill that was passed indicated that de minimis for all countries was going to be eliminated in 2027. And as many of us anticipated, an executive order came out doing away with de minimis on August 29th. So what does that mean? That means everyone's going to have to do an O1 and 11, a normal entry for all goods coming into the United States. Type 86 goes away entirely, which I'm kind of sad about because I helped design Type 86. And we are going to see that go away in its entirety. The only difference that we saw in the executive order was the postal shipments coming in. And postal shipments are unique. The Postal Service, when it comes to international mail and international packages, is part of a treaty, the United Postal Union. And that international treaty defines how each of the postal services can and should act for mail, including packages coming into each of their countries. So the UPU has some pretty strict guidelines. It has its own data set called the CN22 that allows those foreign postal services to send information into the U.S. Postal Service and into the U.S. government, into CBP, so that they can do their targeting and analysis and make sure that the goods coming in are within the purview of the United States. However, there's no way to, at scale, in bulk, to declare all of those packages on an entry. Well, why is that? Because classification and declaring entries in ACE are defined as customs business. So the Postal Service is not a customs business. It's not a customs broker. They don't have a customs broker to date. So the interim to fill that gap, what we are seeing is that the carriers that carry the international mail have a bond and are required to pay the outline duty to U.S. Customs and Border Protection for all of those shipments that are going to be declared as de minimis or under that $800. And I believe that's to simply facilitate the collection of the duty. There was a phrase in there about that would be reviewed after 6 months to determine if the Postal Service can assess the accurate duty rates, and the only way they can do that is by understanding the classification. What we are seeing is that the Postal Service shipments will have to pay the reciprocal rate that is outlined for that country. Now that means that they aren't going to pay the base duty rate, which in most cases are lower anyway. But the duty rate will be equal to the reciprocal rate. So it might be a little more cost effective for folks to send their shipments into the Postal Service, but we see that again as an interim measure. So that's what's going on. I think we've filled the blank space, Lalo, quite effectively.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, that was a good summary, and we're more to come, obviously, and I won't be around for those. I'm just here to introduce Cindy for the first episode, but she may have a guest every once in a while, and so but other than that, her information will be uniquely hers and provided this way. But thank you so much, Cindy, and looking forward to a lot more of these.
Yeah, we'll talk to you all next week.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.